On today's show, why have the Miami Heat struggled to beat good teams this season? Are they still legitimate contenders? And concerns with Jimmy Butler. Is playoff Jimmy a guaranteed phenomenon, or is it not looking so hot this year? It's all coming up on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. You just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of different players and stat types, which is what makes Prize Picks the #1 DFS app on the market. And now it's demon time on Prize Picks. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play over at Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times back your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So if you've been thinking about giving daily fantasy sports a try, go check out Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA with promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Heat and Locked On NBA, Wes Goldberg. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcast and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Heat. Now, Wes, when Miami and Cleveland met in the middle of last week, it took some late game heroics from Terry Rozier for the Heat to pull off the 107-104 win. Then just a few days later, Sunday evening, a completely different story, an absolute blowout win in favor of the Miami Heat. Why was this Heat-Cavs rematch so different the second time around, just a few days removed from the first one?
It's a great question. I have not seen a team give up the way that the Cavs did basically all season. This team looked like they did not want to be playing basketball tonight. Miami got out to a quick start. Credit to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo setting the tone early in this one. Jimmy Butler is very sort of like, all right, what kind of Jimmy are we getting tonight? You know, kind of thing. Is he going to be all NBA caliber superstar Jimmy Butler, or is he going to be, you know what, I kind of want somebody else to do the heavy lifting tonight, Jimmy Butler. And tonight it was a pushing the pace, very motivated, very engaged Jimmy Butler who played like the best player on the floor. The Heat were down Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero, Kevin Love, Josh Richardson, just so many guys in the rotation. This team has been banged up all year long, and they're going through a particularly tough stretch of injuries right now. And, you know, the Heat are very, you know, they like to say next man up, we have enough and all this kind of stuff. And that stuff's cute. It is. And it's worthwhile. But at the end of the day, you just need your star players to play like your best players, you know? And so that's it. When you're down the guys that they were down, you just needed Jimmy to be engaged really early and just play like the best guy on the floor, especially against the Cavs team that was without Donovan Mitchell and was working Evan Mobley back into the rotation. And so that's what he was. 9 points in his first 8 minutes, set the tone. Bam kind of took the baton from there. And next thing you knew, the Heat were up by almost 30 points. And then they extended the lead to 40 points by the third quarter. And the Cavs were just like, this one's over. Get us out of here. And they basically just started handing the ball to the Heat. And they were like, cool, thanks. We'll take it down to the other end and score. The Cavs didn't even bother getting back on defense. And so, you know, I hope the Cavs had like dinner reservations or something better to do, because they certainly did not look like they wanted to be playing Jimmy Butler in the Heat tonight.
The Cavs certainly needed a pick-me-up after that just excruciating beatdown of a game. I want to follow up with you about the Jimmy stuff, because I think Jimmy's play this season has been kind of polarizing. But first, just mention, you know, Scary Terry, his play in the first meetup between these two teams. You know, he was a big midseason acquisition for this Miami Heat team. How important has he been, and how has he kind of fit into this Heat team and their identity?
He's actually fit in pretty well. It was rough to start. I mean, he went basically 2 weeks without getting a practice just because of the timing and the weird schedule that they had. And so he was basically just figuring it out on the fly, and it wasn't working great. But the Heat really needed just some of the things that he brings in a vacuum as a player: rim pressure, active on defense, and obviously just a willingness to pull up from three, as you mentioned, like the Cavs game the other night. Just having the cojones to just go back there and take a couple of step back threes when the team needed him to, right? And so that's not something that they were getting from Kyle Lowry at that position. And they just needed more of a scoring threat there to sort of lift the offense, which has not been good all year long. And so I think as he's gotten better, he's leaned more into what it is that he does well and stopped worrying about sort of stepping on the toes of Bam and Jimmy and these other guys. And that's basically what the coaching staff and his teammates have been preaching. They said, hey, we brought you here for a reason. We need you to be aggressive. Go play your game. If you want to go score 20 points, go score 20 points. You're not taking anything off our plate that we didn't want. You know what I mean? And so he's gotten more comfortable. He's become more of a scorer. And as he's gotten more comfortable, the 3-point percentages have started to climb back to where he's been at through his career. And I think you look at that trade now and you judge it, and I think it was a home run for the Heat. And if the Heat do end up making another deep postseason run, he's going to end up being a big part of it.
Now, despite these couple back-to-back wins against the 3-seeded Cavs, who were clearly not at full strength and, missing some key, obviously Miami banged up as well, but why has Miami really struggled to beat good teams this season? That's kind of been a concerning trend with this team. Is it simply, can it just be chalked up to health? Is it because this team is kind of coasting and they're like, we'll just get to the postseason and then we'll start taking it seriously? Or is it something else entirely?
I think you definitely have to start with the health thing. And it's such a great point. We talk about it all the time on Locked On Heat. It's like, okay, yeah, you could beat these bad teams, but then you're 3-18 against teams with a top 10 point differential. Like, where's the statement win this season? They really don't have like a big statement win that shows me at all that this team, not last year's team that made the run, this team is capable of beating those good teams, Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks, just on their own side of the bracket, let alone who might be facing, who's in the Western side of the bracket. So, no, I think you start with injuries. You have to. It is a real thing, despite the Heat not wanting to admit it. Like, it is a real thing when your best players are hurt for a long time. But I also think that, you look around the league and a lot of their competition just got better, man. And the Heat, I think they're a little bit better than they were last year. I do. I think Terry Rozier is an upgrade. I think they've added some depth with guys like Jaime Jaquez and other guys, but I don't know that the level that they got better is the same level that these other teams around them have gotten better, right? I just think that the gap is so much greater than what it was last year. So I think that's part of it. I also do think that there is a little bit of, okay, we don't really care about getting these wins in the regular season. Like, a statement win to us doesn't matter, even if you guys want us to prove it. And I don't even know if that's the right or wrong approach, honestly. I think that's how they think. They prioritize things other than winning in the regular season. They prioritize experimenting, figuring out new rotations, new lineups, different combinations, and developing into the best team that you could be by the time the playoffs come around. And if it costs you a few wins here and there, then so be it, right? And so that's sort of part of their game plan. We'll see if it works out. I don't know. I have no reason to think that this team is as good as some of the top teams in the East right now, but they've surprised me before.
And that's kind of the big question, right? Is this Miami Heat team, are they still legit contenders, right? You talk about the competition getting better around them, and specifically you can point the finger probably at a guy like Jimmy Butler, right? With the whole the playoff Jimmy thing, right? Is it real? Does this team really have, like, I guess, a switch that they feel confident that they can flip when the postseason actually gets here?
Jimmy does. Like, Jimmy definitely does. And the thing that Eric Spoelstra always talks about is the difference between regular season basketball and playoff basketball. And maybe it's just the case that this team is not very good at regular season basketball, but it's very good at playoff basketball, which sounds like an insane thing to say, but you've heard coaches and players talk about this over the years, like how it is just different. Draymond Green a few years ago said you've got 82 game players and 16 game players, right? And I think the Heat are just a bunch of 16 game players and not a whole lot of 82 game players. And maybe that's just like, it's like the biggest like divergent between those two things ever with a team is this one, and maybe even last year's team too. But I don't know. I think they believe that they're contenders. And I'll say this: if Jimmy Butler is playing at that All NBA level, the level that we know he can get to,
the playoff Jimmy level,
the playoff Jimmy, if he's doing that, then this team is a contender. I have absolutely zero doubts about that. My question is whether or not you can ask a 34-year-old Jimmy Butler, who's just done this basically 3 times out of the last 4 years, and it takes a lot of wear and tear on that body. I don't think we can also just assume 34-year-old Jimmy Butler can turn into playoff Jimmy again. Even last year, kind of quietly worn down. By the time the NBA Finals rolled around, Bam Adebayo was Miami's best player. It wasn't Jimmy Butler anymore. And so how much can you really ask of him? How much can you expect of him? And if he doesn't turn into playoff Jimmy at that level, then I think you do have to ask yourself some serious questions if you're the Heat.
Can this Miami Heat team get healthy ahead of a ideally deep postseason run? Can they switch the flip in the playoffs? You're going to have us cover for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Heat. Wes, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thanks for having me, man.